Now for our roundtable with WPTV political analyst Mariana Mancuso and Brian Crowley.
You heard the Palm Beach County administrator, when I talked to her at midweek, I would stress, say no crisis with hospital beds right now. When we were done taping, we talked about the fact that a lot of these judgments have to be made on a day-by-day or at least a bi-weekly basis. So we'll see how that goes. But the politics of healthcare and this healthcare crisis as it continues to evolve in terms of what residents/voters are saying, feeling, and ultimately will do. Brian?
Well, let's start with the idea that there should be no politics in the midst of a healthcare crisis. It's not like you can call COVID-19's representatives into a room and sit down and negotiate with them. The pandemic's going to do what the pandemic's going to do. So you have to follow the advice of medical professionals. So it's sort of sad that, in our country, which should be a leader in the world in how to handle the pandemic, we're following behind other countries because we've decided to drop politics into the middle of all this. It's silly and it's not good for the folks.
Mariana, Florida Democrats, this article in the Palm Beach Post, the headline this week, Florida Democrats, congressional Democrats tell the governor to require masks, close the beaches, back off schools. It is, again, the give and take, Republicans, Democrats arguing about the best way to go here, Mariana.
To Brian's point, this should not be a political football. The reality is that we need to get back to being a healthy society. And if we have to close things down to be able to get back to that, then those are things that we need to do. And it's unfortunate that people don't want to be inconvenienced for their health and the health and safety of others.
Unfortunately, it is to some degree, or perhaps a large one, of political football. Given that reality, who wins, who loses?
Well, currently Floridians are losing because the spike in COVID cases across the state is just skyrocketing. We're out of ICU beds. This is absolutely abysmal. And the reality is this didn't have to be. DeSantis took an early victory lap and he shouldn't have, and he knows it. And now Floridians are suffering and dying. And the reality is we need to figure out how to get everyone healthy and keep them safe.
Brian, who pays the political price for all this right now? And I know, again, that's a moving target as well. There are many in this state who applaud Governor DeSantis for reopening, saying economically, we just couldn't take it anymore. So there's a lot of sides to this equation, but it is part of the political calculus everyone will make themselves before they go to vote in the primaries in August, then the general election in November.
Well, politically, look, what citizens want in a time of a crisis is leaders who can lead us in the right direction, doing the best they can, and they want them to be a calming influence and as I say, guide everybody. Ron DeSantis sort of started out that way, but then he got caught up in the politics of this stuff, and it's just silly. Listen to the medical experts, listen to the scientists. Are they going to make mistakes along the way? Sure, because the COVID-19 crisis is evolving and their understanding of the virus itself evolves as they learn more. It's a new virus. We expect that. But we also expect our political leaders to, this is the time where you show compassion. It's a very difficult time. I don't envy any of the political leaders that are dealing with this when you have the economy falling apart, the state budget losing a ton of money, local budgets will be hit hard next. And this crisis isn't going to be over anytime soon. And we're seeing this now in this big argument over whether or not kids should go back to school in the fall. That's not a political issue. That should be a local issue decided on a local basis.
But the way it's handled ultimately will influence thinking. Mariana, pick up on that point.
Absolutely. It's going to be influenced. And the reality is that when we think about this, everybody is learning how to handle this pandemic in real time. We're watching our leaders having to take information from medical experts, distill it down, and figure out what's best for the community and what's best for constituents. And at the end of the day, we're looking for leadership and we're looking for that calm and sustained voice. And now we're having to look to our county, specifically Palm Beach County, as they look to make the most appropriate decisions for our students in the fall.
You had a Democrat, Dan Gelber, Miami Beach mayor, really going after the Republican governor, saying, I'm quoting here, the governor should be lying awake at night, wondering who isn't being reached by contact tracers, the contact tracing needed to try and corral COVID. Again, it's an example. We may want it to be devoid of politics, but it simply isn't, Brian.
Well, our country's been through really bad times before. When we had the Great Depression, we also had polio epidemics. Yeah. And I know this firsthand because my father had polio when he was 2 or 3 years old and never walked again. So, in the midst of a Great Depression, his family's suffering, he winds up with polio at 2 or 3 years old never walks in. But leaders weren't fighting over it. This way, they might have been fighting over the economic side of it, but they weren't fighting over what to do with the polio epidemic. They were desperately trying to find a cure, which they eventually did, but it took years and years and years. And we may face the same thing with this virus. It may take years before we have the right vaccines and the right remedies. So, we need leadership that calms things and leads us forwards, not leadership that, wants to divide everybody over silly issues like masks.
And people will make their choices at the ballot box depending on who they feel best embodies those virtues. Final quick top of mind thought, Marianne, about what you're hearing out there.
One of the things that I saw this past week that I found absolutely abysmal was that Ron DeSantis held a press conference in Miami, and he was asked about contact tracers. And when he was asked about it, he said that it was Miami, the county had the ability to hire them. Meanwhile, the county pushed back and said, no, we were told that it was a Department of Health issue at the state level. And the press actually looked at the governor and said, can you two talk to each other and figure out who needs to do this to keep everybody safe?